So it's been quite a while since it's been worth mentioning the top 10 loadouts of Warzone, best weapons of Modern Warfare 2 MP, because, well, it's been 2 months since our last balancing pass, but with Season 2's launch, we saw a tuning pass to weapons across the board for Modern Warfare 2, Warzone 2, and DMZ. And while we normally do our seasonal top 10 loadout video to kick off the first weekend of every season, today I want to take a slight deviation with this one and discuss the top 10 loadouts for Ashika Island and Resurgence here in this one, tackling the maybe overall Mazrah large-scale map top 10 next week at some point, but today I wanted to run down what's proved incredibly beneficial and incredibly helpful to me out of the massive grind for Season 2 in Ashika Island that I've done so far. So drop your thoughts below as we go along. Any weapon that you think should be on this list, maybe that shouldn't, let me know, and as well what your preferred build would be along with it. If you'd like to join the community, feel free to subscribe. I'd love to have you. And finally, check out GFuel linked below, where there's a few great items for 30% off with code Espresso for the entirety of the month of February, including 2 of my favorite flavors of Hype Sauce and Starfruit. But let's get into the discussion of the best loadouts. So first and foremost, we got to touch on the general focus here of this versus other top 10s that we've done in the past. Now, Ashika Island and Resurgence as a whole present unique gameplay opportunities that Mazrah doesn't necessarily have in a lot of cases. You aren't going to be taking gunfights at 80 to 100 meters across the desert with wide open fields and things like that. There's a lot more cover, a lot more condensed nature of the map in Resurgence, which adds to the overall pacing and chaos of it all. So while in Mazrah, you'd really want to make sure you're kitting your weapons out for things like damage control, recoil control, especially at a distance, and other variables focusing on the aspect of controlling that weapon and reeling it in. Instead, now in Ashika Island and Resurgence, you're going to likely want to focus on things like sprint to fire and ADS speeds, weapons with increased rate of fire, or exceptional damage close range. These things shift that focus, and when we cover the overall top 10 loadouts likely next Friday, you'll hopefully see that there's a difference between the two play spaces. So with that in mind, let's jump into and discuss a few of the favorites right now that I have for weapons in Ashika Island. Let's start with our air quote long range in the context of Ashika Island. What you want to like clear streets or any sort of distance that isn't like in a building, in a corridor or something like that. Hillsides, streets, you name it. Stuff that you can down players at a distance, but if you get downed, you have time to hopefully get a res off and get out of there. Firstly, I want to start with the TAC 56. So this one was for sure in the Season 1 mix, but it's just one of my favorite weapons to use, and seeing that it wasn't touched at all in the balancing pass of Season 2, it's still a very valid weapon, if not even more valid than it was beforehand. Probably the easiest to control weapon for recoil at any sort of air quote range if you ask me, controllable fire rate and packing enough punch to get the job done. It's the jack of all trades weapon to me. Now the builds on this, I'm actually going to pitch you more than one here at this because I think there's some versatility in it. And additionally, to save on the monotony of talking about every single tuning value number, as always, we'll end up having those tuning values over on the left-hand side of the display here in the video for you, so that you can check it out at any point. But anyways, for this, the first build that I primarily use here and have used for a while is the 17.5-inch Tundra Pro barrel. Then I'll follow it up with the Echoless 80 muzzle, the 5.56 high-velocity ammunition, the 60-round magazine, and the FSS combat grip, something that gives you a nice mix of control, but also decent mobility, and again, you don't have to sacrifice any attachment slot for the optic because the entire TAC platform has pretty solid iron sights. Now, that build is a solid compromise of the base of the TAC movement properties, but also changing again for some control at medium distance, but not necessarily sacrificing too much where you notice it becomes a detriment. However, with Ashika Island, I have actually been shifting over to something that offers similar control, but also because you take a barrel out of the equation, it's a little bit faster in regards to the snappy nature of it and grants you a little bit more mobility in that regard. For that second build I'd recommend, it's the Harbinger D20, the Edge 47 grip, the 5.56 high velocity ammunition, the 60-round magazine, and the FSS combat grip. So slightly adjusted here with this, making some trade-offs for additional control with the Harbinger, but also gaining a little bit more mobility back by not having any single barrel on that. Now, if you want to go a little bit more with the snappy nature of an ADS, you can gain a few frames back by changing to the 40-round mag as opposed to the 60. It's really all up to your preference. Now, the next weapon that I had an absolute blast with, this one really surprised me, the M13B. For such a high fire rate weapon, this thing is really easy to control even at a semi-distance, but the fire rate up close and at medium range is where it really makes it a menace to go up against. This, while I'm not necessarily placing anything in this video in a strict 1 to 10 order, this was probably in my top 3 weapons that I enjoyed using. Not saying it's the 3rd best weapon in the game, there's way too many situational variables to account for that in particular and definitively say that, but I really enjoyed using this weapon. For this build, I'd recommend the Bruin Echelon barrel, the Sakin or Sock Tread 40 muzzle, the Edge 47 grip underbarrel, the 60-round magazine, and any optic of your choice, just because I'm not a huge fan of the iron sights on the M13. For me, it was just the Cronin Mini Pro Blue Dot, but if you want to use the AMOP V4, the SZ SR07, whatever you want, it's entirely up to you. But seriously, if you end up playing with this thing, it will absolutely shred through enemies, minimal recoil, but the fire rate, again, that becomes incredibly deadly. This is a true like mid-range weapon if you ask me, because it is something that does carry some power over distance in Ashika Island, but at the same time, you also don't necessarily need to kit it for long range. Now beyond that, the next weapon, unfortunately, well, it's the RPK. The RPK did get adjusted here in regards to the weapon tuning pass in Season 2's update, but it didn't really attack it where it really needed to be attacked, if that makes sense. Like, they adjusted it, but they were adjusting the wrong things. Some of the attributes they did nerf, yes, were really big factors of why the gun was good, but it wasn't all of them. And so therefore, this thing still has a very relevant place in the meta. For this, honestly, I think the build that we've recommended before can still hold up. That being your SZ SR07 optic, or an optic of your choice. Again, it's a little bit less of a requirement for that long-range precision here that optic that I just recommended usually gives. If you want to take a red dot or a blue dot, you probably can, because it is something that is much closer quarters. I still run the Kastovia DX90 muzzle, the F-Tac Ripper underbarrel, though if you want to use that Edge 47 as well, that is still a great choice. You can use the high velocity ammunition, though if you do want to actually sacrifice the base 75 round magazine for the 40 round magazine, that's something that will give you more ADS speed, more sprint to fire, and reload quickness, as well as your just overall movement speed, that by dropping that round drum magazine at base, you can end up getting those properties back. And then I run the Demo X2 grip for just a bit more control in regards to the kick of the weapon. So RPK, still very powerful weapon, still something you'll see, unfortunately, after 3 months here of it being the main weapon. We'll just see if it becomes still the main used weapon or not, but definitely viable and definitely will get the job done on Ashika Island. Now, beyond that, the last weapon we'll talk about as a sort of rifle and is more of a versatile one that can transition into more close quarters and CQC combat is the Chimera. This one will toss out 2 builds here at this one for a bit more control, another one for specifically more close quarters engagements. But firstly, the one if you want to take it from medium range as your sort of primary long range gun with an SMG or like a pistol or something like that, I'd recommend the 10-inch SA Phoenix barrel, the Lockshot KT85 muzzle, the Edge 47 grip, the 45 round magazine, and for me, if you want something at a distance, I'd recommend a bit more precision like the Cronin Mini Pro, like a red dot or an optic of your choice. But again, that's where we can get into a transition into a bit more of a closer quarters build with this as well, because you can sacrifice that SA10 barrel and then end up changing that to the 6.5 EXF OP40 barrel, that giving you more ADS, movement speed, and hip recoil control. And you can drop the optic and go to something like the Bruin Flash Grip, which will give you more sprint to fire speed and aim down sight speed. So that truly making it a snappy, almost SMG hybrid rifle, but it's something that can get the job done absolutely. So try that one out. But again, we talked about how that's going to transition us now into a sort of more closer quarters focus on this. The first one that I want to recommend is the Lachmann sub, or the MP5. This has been one of my favorites here on Ashika Island, just because you can kit it out for very good mobility and it will still get the job done in an incredibly easy fashion. For this, I'd recommend the VLK Laser 7 milliwatt, the Lachmann Pulsar barrel, that giving you a bit more aim down sight, hip recoil control, and movement speed, the Lock Grip Precision 40 underbarrel, the 40 round magazine. The 50 gets a little clunky in that animation and also adds a bit more time to not only just the reload speed, but also sacrifices a bit more in that ADS speed and sprint to fire speed as well. So the 40, I think, is a nice little compromise between the base and giving you a bit more ammunition. And then finally, I'll run the Lachmann TCG10 rear grip to give me a little bit more recoil control. When you put all that together, it's a weapon that, again, you can breeze through with a lot of speed through the map, sprinting at a higher mobility rate, but also you're able to get that gun up and take engagements faster than a lot of people will end up being able to. So highly recommend that build. But another SMG that I was absolutely loving here on Ashika Island was the Vaznev. This one, there's a few subtleties to how I see people make their builds for the Vaznev, and it's totally cool because it is something that can allow for a sort of custom tailor fit to however you want to play. So attachments here and there on this you can absolutely still do well with, but for my build, I'd recommend the FSS OV laser, the CAS 1 381mm barrel, the 45 round magazine, just because I like having extra ammo, if I'm honest with you. 30 can get the job done, but I feel like I can take out 2-3 players in a magazine in a pinch situation. I don't want to get caught reloading. That's happened to me way too many times in the past, and so it's kind of like just one of those things I don't want to get burned by again. Then I'll run the True Tac grip for sprint to fire speed and ADS speed, and the Markiv R7 stock for crouch movement speed, sprint speed, and aim down sight speed. So this one, you really want to capitalize on the mobility mobility of this gun, because the base damage and fire rate will do the rest. So highly recommend that build as well. The other SMG that I want to touch on here, and the last one we'll touch on for this video, is unfortunately again the Fennec. Just like the RPK, it was adjusted in the weapon tuning pass with Season 2, but it wasn't something that really killed the weapon. And with the rate of fire, you can do exactly what Infinity Ward did, decrease the damage overall, decrease the headshot damage, but when you have something with that high a rate of fire, you're barely going to notice any difference with that unless you really kill that gun. So it is something that you might notice it takes 1, 2, maybe 3 more shots depending on where they land, but you're still going to absolutely fry with this thing. So for that, I would still recommend the build that we've talked about beforehand, the VLK Laser 7 milliwatt, the Fennec Covert Force Barrel, the Merc foregrip, the 45 round mag. Anything less, honestly, I would not recommend. Wouldn't go with the base, and obviously I wouldn't go with the double tap mod either. And then the Fennec Rubber Grip for that rear grip for added sprint to fire speed and aim down sight speed. This is really more so for your close quarters to absolutely shred during it. So you're not taking any optic for any precision or anything like that, but you can get the job done with ease. Now, the final weapon that I want to talk about here in terms of like definitive use this for close quarters, we have 2 other weapons here after these to talk about, but they're more so like fit them in where you want to, kind of. But one weapon that I would highly recommend for close quarters is one that is super trolly. It's kind of busted, but the single snake shot Magnum, that being something that for that build, you are going to annihilate players. I was getting some great death comms with it whenever I was getting footage for it, and dude, people don't like it. I don't like it. I would hate going up against it. If you can land your shots, it's a 2-shot, armor break, and then down. And again, with it being something that is so quick, players don't have any chance to really react to it. For this, I'd recommend the Revo LSD 7 milliwatt laser, the Bryson HTA trigger action, the 500 snake shot ammunition. That's what really makes it. You want the rapid loader for the loader, so you can end up getting that in quicker, getting those reloads off faster, and the SO RO99 grip for added pistol fast draw, sprint to fire speed, and aim down sight speed. Of course, you're also going to tailor some of those tunings to end up making sure that you have a bit faster of a draw in sprint to fire and ADS, but seriously, that is one that is just, I hate that I'm including it, but it's worth running, seriously. So beyond that, the final 2 weapons I want to talk about are the RAAL and the Kastov 7.62. So we'll breeze through these. Again, both very good weapons, but ones that I just felt like I enjoyed these other ones we talked about more than these last 2. For this, I'd recommend the SZ SRO7 optic, the EXF Rhino barrel. The Talon 16 is still one that I would recommend just because you get that sound suppression, but also bullet velocity, recoil control, and it's something that, again, you kind of get that same benefit as if you were to take a regular muzzle, something that doesn't also offer up the suppressing value of it. But then I'd run the XRK Dune Grip and the Stip 40 for added recoil control. This being a slower build, but it is something that will give you incredible control over the weapon. And finally, the Kastov 7.62. You can get away with no barrel, but I'd recommend something like the Sock and Shred 40, the Edge 47 grip. You can put on the high velocity ammunition if you'd like. The 40 round magazine is probably the sweet spot here at that. And then some sort of optic, because the Kastovia platform doesn't have the best iron sights if you're playing for anything outside of close quarters. If you want to kit it out for like an SMG or something like that, like a more mobile rifle build here, something for close quarters, you can get away with it. But anything that like this, it would thrive at mid-range. You'll want some sort of optic, AIM-OP V4, SC SR07, even just a red or blue dot you can get away with as well. But that is the top 10 weapons that I would recommend here for Ashika Island. And so therefore, let me know how you do with these. Try some of these out. I definitely think they can hold their own against your competition here. So feel free to drop your thoughts below on what you think of these builds, how you did with them, whatever the case. Feel free to let me know. Before we wrap everything up, make sure to check out my friends over at GFuel. Some select items are 30% off from now until the end of February, including Hype Sauce and Starfruit, 2 of my favorite flavors here in the entire catalog of GFuel's offering. I end up having those in my daily rotation. I have a cup of GFuel like every morning, like it's my cup of coffee almost. So 30% off with code Espresso, link down there in the description below, but check it out only if you want to. For now, that's what we're gonna call it though. So again, drop your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare 2, Warzone 2, and anything COD related. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.